Okay, this is the propeller of what's going to be a wind generator. I'm going to show you how I built the arbour in the middle first, and then we'll get onto the blades, then we'll get onto building the whole thing. Just to give you an idea of the sort of size this thing is. I don't know if you can actually see that. That's a 12-inch ruler. So maybe if I give you that, you'll see that this particular one is about 54 centimetres in diameter. But that's what we're going to build. We're not going to go to specific dimensions in terms of the pitch and the angle. We're just going to build it to work as a garden ornament that just happens to generate a little bit of electricity for driving some LEDs. So without boring you too much, I'll move on. First, a little bit of a view round. Right, the first thing that I did was to produce this drawing, and then I just cut that out and stick it on the piece of 18mm plywood, and then proceed to cut out. I'll make this downloadable, so if anybody wants to look at the drawing in more detail they can do. As you can see, I've cut that out and I've got myself a piece of plywood. I have plenty of this knocking around, or pieces of it anyway. This is marine grade plywood. It's quite expensive, but it does the job perfectly. If you can't get hold of any of this, another way that I've done it is I've just got 4mm pieces of timber, glue them together, make a laminate. I think you'll agree it does work the same, because that's what I've done quite a few times until I got my hands on some of this stuff. So now I'm going to glue that on there, and all I'm going to use is just standard PVA glue. There we go, all glued on, and now I've got to go off and cut those into the correct shape. I'm going to actually make a little jig up to show you how to get those a little bit more perfect if you're only using hand tools, which is all I'm actually using for this. I've just cut that with a saw. I'll get the saw. I like these little Japanese saws. These are the sort I use. Now, the one thing I should have mentioned, before I actually cut this out, I like to drill the hole in the centre. And because I'm going to be using M6 threaded bar and all the nuts and bolts and washers that go with this, I need to drill a hole in the middle of there, 6mm. Now, as you can see, that's my 6mm hole in the centre, and that's my bar that goes in. First part of the jig is a piece of timber. This is just a scrap piece of MDF I've got knocking around, 18mm, and it just happens to be 31.5 centimetres. The next thing we need to do is line that to one of the outer edges like so. So if you can actually see that edge there is level with the edge of that. Drill an hole through the middle. As you can see, I've marked up the centre and drilled the hole. As you can see, I've now drilled another piece, a bit small. These are just scrap off cuts, and the idea of that is that will go in the middle and that will go on the top and get sandwiched with a piece of threaded bar. But before I do that, what I like to do is I like to get two bits of scrap pieces of this and put either side, leaving enough room for that to be able to spin. I think you can see where we're going. So I'll get those two pieces cut now and screwed in position. Now there's my two pieces cut, and the trick on this one is to make sure that when the centre's in, that they clear. Only a couple of mil either side, that's all. And then drill and fasten those, but only in the middle. So it's one screw in each middle of that for now. Now I think you can see those two on there, and you can see that spins in the middle. I know most of you won't need to make this jig because you're quite capable of cutting that out. And now we need to put that on the rod, on there, and screw down. Right, that's those done. and countersunk. They must be countersunk. There's a reason for that, is you have to put a very thin cardboard or fag packet thickness, if you want to get really specific. There you go. So just cut those out and put them on there. You also may have noticed I've actually made a new one of these. I made a boo-boo and I actually made the other one too short to sit on them 2 blocks. You need that little piece of cardboard in there as a spacer to allow the hood to spin, because if you just screw that on top of there, because that's got that paper on there, they are the same thickness as that, it will be very tight and we'll just rip the paper off, and we need the paper for the markings. So we'll put those cards on. That's that screwed together. Next thing we need to do is we need to put a bolt through the middle of there that we can take in and out. And now we don't want the bolt sticking above like so, so we're just going to put a little sink in there. As you can see, I've put the bolt through. I like these big penny washers with a wing nut. Loosen the wing nut, turn it into position. As you can see, I don't know if you can actually see that on the video. You see that line there from our drawing underneath. Make that perfectly square with our edge and tighten it down. Now you can actually see it's sticking out more than it needs to be. That's fine, it doesn't really matter as long as they're all the same. And now we just cut that off. So we'll clamp this to the bench. We've got that lined up. We take our long saw and we just cut that across there. As you can see, that's our first one cut off. Now we undo the nut in the middle and we turn it round, get it perfectly straight, tighten up and do the next one. Right, that's all more cut. I'm now going to take it out. Now I think you will agree that is absolute perfect. Still going to require this jig for cutting the slots in like so. Put this back in and put the bolt back in. What we need to do is mark across at the flat edges. So a little tip, the way that we do that is you put your pencil on the mark where you want to mark, pull your square down to it, so on, square down to it, mark across. Same there, square down to it, mark across. The next thing we need to do is we need to mark across those two like so. Hope you can see that. And then we need to go all the way across. Make sure we make a good mark. There's a mark all the way across. The next thing we need to do is we need to mark down there 20mm on both sides, and that's where we're going to cut down to. Both sides, I hope you can see that. We now clamp that to the front of the bench and we're going to cut that down to those 2 marks. Now that needs to be 4mm wide, so you're going to have to put 2 or 3 times down with a saw. What I tend to do is go just this side of the line with the saw, and then the other side of the line with the saw. So it's 2 cuts to get your 4mm. As you can see, down to 20mm across. If you get your first one wrong, they're all wrong. Now, so what you do now is obviously undo that. Make sure that's perfectly flat. If you look from the side, you can see that. And it's got to be because you've cut it in this jig. Now you've got your guide for doing the next one. It's only your first one that's difficult. Well, that's my last one cut, so now I'm going to take it out. So that's it out, and there's your arbor.